Hello friends, Ben from Moto Camp Nerd here along with Grace, also from Moto Camp Nerd at the moment.
Yes.
And today we're tackling a topic that seems to be a pretty common searched for question, which is, when you've progressed beyond kind of your very first moto camping trip and you start thinking about longer trips, how do you pack for a week-long motorcycle trip or beyond? So I've done a few BDR trips, those are about a week, and Grace here lived off her bike for most of a year, riding and camping and doing all that stuff. So I've enlisted her help because she has a lot more experience than I do in this particular area. And we're just gonna kind of talk through the challenges and differences and kind of some tips for people looking to camp for a week or more off of their bike.
Sounds great, Ben.
Pretty
Let's
exciting.
get to it.
My first question for you is, what is the difference, or what are the differences between an overnight trip and a week or more?
Oh, there are some major differences. And the first one that I will highlight is what you pack clothing-wise. Because if you are going for a week-long trip, you are essentially just going to pack like you would for an overnight trip. And I know that's gonna scare a lot of people because you're gonna be very smelly at the end. But that is just the way it goes with motorcycle packing and camping. You have to utilize what you have, and that's gonna be a small amount of socks, underwear, and base layers just to keep you at least somewhat dry and kind of clean while you're on the road.
Why though?
Why?
Yeah, why wouldn't you just pack a week's worth of clothes?
Well, we've all seen motorcycle luggage, and unfortunately we can't take a lot of it on our bikes, especially if you are doing a more advanced or intermediate off-road ride. You are not going to want a fully loaded down motorcycle going off-road, taking some harder lines, getting into some rougher terrain. This is coming from somebody who lived off their bike and had a fully weighed down motorcycle for about a year. So I would highly advise against that. The lighter you pack, the better your ride's gonna be.
And the easier it is to pick it up.
Exactly.
I've seen people pack like a whole extra bag full of clothes. So for example, on my week-long trips, I will just take literally one extra shirt, and I'll carry 2 extra pairs of socks and 2 extra pairs of underwear so that I have one to wash and one to be on me and one to change into if I need to while the other one is still drying or whatever. So pants is like, I used to worry about pants, but I just bring camp pants because I'm wearing my riding pants 80% of the time.
Absolutely.
And they already smell, so it doesn't matter.
I do the same with a lot of my backpacking trips too. I have my, what I call my outdoor or exploration outfit. So that's usually, in the motorcycle sense, that's gonna be your full kit that you're wearing for protection. Like Ben said, you're in that 80% of the time. Then you have a camp outfit, comfy pants, layers so you stay warm because it gets cold at night. But otherwise, that's kind of it. Also, wet wipes. Wet wipes are your best friend. Don't forget to pack those.
What about camping gear? Is your camping gear different for a week-long trip versus like an overnight?
It's pretty similar actually.
Yeah.
I would also like to recommend that you get a jet boil if you don't have one already. I know that's a staple amongst the moto community, but that can make your meals for you, that makes your coffee for you. If you're in dire straits and need water, it will boil water for you so it's safe to drink. It is definitely something you want to have in your pack if you're doing a camping trip. Now, of course, camping is different than overnight hotel stays. In that case, you won't need to pack nearly as much in the camping department. In fact, you could leave your tent at home, but you'll miss out on all the fun.
But then you have room for more clothes. So
Yes.
if your priority is not being a smelly dirtbag, then you could stay in a hotel, take a shower, and change your clothes. But there's generally, without overpacking your bike, there's really no way to carry a duffel bag full of clothes and all your camping gear and your tools and everything else you need.
Absolutely.
So you just need to embrace that kind of minimalist lifestyle and realize that you need less than you think you do.
You do.
It's not the same as going on a car trip.
In an emergency situation, if you forgot something, as long as you are not in the middle of the Nevada desert, you can go to a grocery store or even a pharmacy and find a little something you need. Walmarts are also everywhere, as we all know, so very easy to find.
I think another common mistake, that's my next question, is what are common mistakes people make, is people think they have to carry all their food, right? Because on a backpacking trip you would. You'd have to throw all your dehydrated stuff in your bag and carry it with you the whole time. But on a motorcycle trip, we have to stop for gas once or twice a day at least, right? So you're never gonna be so far out. Even on a BDR, there's the sections end, they're usually 100-ish miles, maybe a little more, and there's a gas station and a place to get food or whatever. So generally food-wise, I just take 2 dehydrated meals with me. So I have them if we end up camping somewhere for the night where I'm not close to anything. camping. And then if I end up using one, I try to replenish it. But for the most part, I try to eat on the road. I actually eat like crap. I usually eat at gas stations, corn dogs and stuff. But
It's what's available.
or just a nice restaurant. Sometimes it's just nice to get out of the heat or the cold, depending on what time you're doing it. Sit down, go wash your face and hands in an actual sink. Being so self-sufficient for the whole week is going to keep your bike super overloaded, and you don't have to be, because we have to dip in and out of civilization. And or if you're on a riding trip on the highway, you can stop anytime you want, right? The stuff is always there.
Absolutely. And this is particularly something I emphasize when it comes to water. Again, I always think, like Ben was saying, he always has 2 dehydrated meals on him. I think it's always good to have your emergency stash on you. I usually have quite a few power bars. I take liquid IVs and just little things that I know if there was a day that went by and I just didn't have access to food or whatever else, I would be okay. But again, especially with a trip like a BDR trip, you're going to be making stops to get gas all the time. So that's when you load up, especially your last stop of the day. That's when you get your water, your snacks, your food, sometimes your beer, whatever you want for your little camp out that you don't want to be carrying with you all day long.
Snacks is a good one, because carrying those dehydrated meals is good, but also shit happens. So like if you get stuck with your buddy in the woods, or you broke your leg and you're there for a few hours, or a bike breaks down, it's important to know you have enough kind of snacks and things to carry you through. So you want to have something. I'm not saying don't carry any food, but a day's worth, a couple days worth, maybe. You don't need 7 days worth. Any other common mistakes you think people make when packing for a longer trip?
Ooh, yes. Not enough socks. So this is the one thing I stress a lot, because obviously you can do your research ahead of time and check the weather forecast. But if you do a couple water crossings and your boots get wet, having a change of socks midday is the best thing ever. So if you are going to splurge on a packing item, socks. I'm telling you, you'll thank me later.
Well, they have multiple uses too. Like if it's cold, you can put them on your hands.
Absolutely.
You can entertain each other with sock puppets.
It's true.
Like you can use it for gathering berries.
Absolutely.
Like you
We
put a
often
rock in
gather
it
berries.
and defend yourself. Socks are very useful.
Yeah, I know. Mountain lions are very scared of socks.
Get time together and make a scarf. I don't know. Whatever you want. What do you wish you'd known before you went out on your first long, extended moto camping trip?
I think the thing that I wish I had known is that the first night I wasn't going to sleep, but then every night after that, I slept like a baby.
Oh, that's a good one, yeah.
Usually the first night of an extended trip, whether it's a couple of days, a week, or even a couple months, the first night your body is still acclimating to all of what you're doing, whether that's riding all day, being outside the whole day, etc. So that first night your body has not quite figured it out yet. The second night though, you'll never sleep better.
That's a great point too, because you go out for a one-nighter and it's just always kind of uncomfortable, and also maybe you're tired because you don't ride that much that often or whatever, but by day 4 you're like tired, but you're kind of a well-oiled machine. Like it's just like I get up, I drink my coffee, I pack my stuff, I get on the bike and I ride for 8 hours, and when I get there and I sleep like a rock because I'm exhausted. You definitely acclimate quickly, and that's something that you don't really experience in a shorter trip, maybe not even a 2-night trip. It's really day 3 or 4 when you start to find a rhythm, I think. So that's an important distinction.
You also find like routine in the non-routine. It's nice to get up and you kind of know what you need to do to get packed up, make your coffee, get ready to ride, and then get out of there. I mean, I think that is often a mistake, and also something I didn't think about ahead of time that I wish I'd known before is sometimes it takes a minute to get out of camp.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to dilly-dally, especially if you are trying to do a BDR trip and cover some ground and you are on a certain timeline. You definitely don't want to be having coffee until 10 or 11 in the morning and then decide to pack up.
Yes, which makes me think of another common mistake, because it's one that I made, and that's carrying a bunch of just in case stuff, right? So it's good to go out on a few overnighters and kind of pare down your kit, but I literally, my first BDR trip, I had 80 pounds of gear. That's way too much, and I had like 3 ways to cook. What I learned is that I didn't use any of those. If I cook in camp, it's a last resort, and then I'm just gonna have a bag meal because it's easy and it's late in the day and I just wanna eat and go to bed anyway.
Another one that I always try to advise people, only if you have room, but most of the time you're in riding boots all day. So when you get to camp, you want to be comfy. Pack a slipper with a nice sole on the bottom, because that's your camp shoe. It's your shoe if you go out to a restaurant or a coffee house or something too. Nobody's gonna care.
That's a great tip.
It's great to have because you want to get your boots off if they've gotten a little wet, either from sweat or a water crossing or rain. They dry out. Also, your feet just feel so much better.
And you're going to build calluses and stuff from rubbing in the same boots all day long. You
Yes.
need to give your feet a break.
Absolutely. I will also say, just coming from somebody who has been and still considers himself part dirtbag, it sounds a little daunting when you hear about all these creature comforts you have to give up, but you get used to it very quickly, and you also start to realize within, I would say even the second day, how little you need to actually get by. You know, when we're at home, it's so much easier to have these things around and it makes life very convenient, but when you're on the road, you just don't need that much. You really don't.
We've talked about gear to bring and what not to bring, but we haven't talked about literal packing. So what do you prioritize? What do you put where? Kind of what goes through your mind when you're putting the stuff on the bike?
I really focus on the weight distribution, which is something that not a lot of people think about until it's too late. And then you get on your bike, one side is a lot heavier than the other because maybe all your clothes are on one side and then all of your actual like tools or whatever else are on the other side, and then you're overcompensating when you're riding. So the first thing I think about is I kind of map out exactly where everything's going to go in my bags and evenly distribute the weight so that the bike is not teeter-tottering or being off while I am zipping around.
To add to that, you want to put the heaviest stuff as low as possible. And conveniently, some of the heaviest stuff is your tools, which hopefully you're not going to need at all,
Yes.
right? So that stuff should go in the bottom of your bag so you're not having to pull it out to get to your camping gear anyway. And it's the heaviest. You want it as low as possible on the bike. And then in terms of what goes in your bag last and or comes out first, I think my best piece of advice is if you're running 3 bags, so if you have 2 panniers and top bag, dry bag, and or if you're running a rackless bag and you kind of have the 3 sections, I like to put the house on the very top for a couple reasons. One, your sleeping bag, your tent, your sleeping pad are the lightest things you have. They're also the ones that are going to hurt the least if you fall on them.
Yeah.
It's also the things you need first when you get to camp, right? You need to get there, you need to pull out your tent, set it up, put your stuff inside it. So again, it keeps you from having to rummage through everything because maybe your clothes and your food are in the bottom of the bag and you don't need them that night, right? But you'd want them in the morning or whatever. So keep the house as high as possible, keep the light stuff as high as possible, keep it as easily accessible as possible.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what Mother Nature's gonna do. I always travel the same. My tent is in my sleeping bag, and all of my stuff that I need right away when I get to camp just to get it set up is usually right there ready to go. I always keep either a layer or an extra neck gaiter or an extra pair of gloves if I decide to bring them if there's going to be a lot of rain intermittently throughout the rides. I always have those right there as well. Just something that if we needed to stop and I needed to quickly warm up, I can just quickly take my jacket off, throw that other layer on, and keep going.
Snacks and water should be easily accessible. I usually just keep them in my backpack. So I have I'll have a Cactus Canteen or something for camp water, but I just fill my hydration pack every morning and my snacks are in the backpack. So anytime I stop, I can get something.
Or tank bag.
Best piece of advice or something you might tell someone who is anxious or nervous about doing this for the first time?
I would say if you're anxious or nervous about this, just don't jump into the deep end of the pool and not give yourself any alternative options. So what I mean by that is don't go out on a 10-day trip your first time and expect that it's going to be the best thing ever. Try a couple of days first. Make sure you feel like you can get into your groove, realize what you need and don't need. I recommend a 3-day trip, again, just because I think being out for just one night is not long enough to get you in that zone. And also, you want that second night of sleep. I'm telling you, it's great. But that would be my advice. And also, give yourself permission to fail and bail out. If you're having a terrible trip, you don't have to worry about it. You have nothing to prove to anybody. Go home, think about how to do it better next time, and start from scratch.
And just knowing that you don't have to tough it out, and it will reduce your anxiety.
Absolutely.
And I think to add to that, you don't have to go far. If there is a campground or a place to camp within an hour of you, and then another one an hour from there, right? You're still at max 2 hours from home. So
Yeah.
do that first trip somewhere close by. So if you're like, oh crap, I forgot my pillow, you could go home or whatever if you need to. Or be close to a city where you can pick up what you need. You kind of have to go out and do it and figure out, like, when you unpack, think about what you touched and what you didn't touch and if you need those things. So yeah, trial run it is great. You don't have to jump off the deep end, stay close to home.
Yeah. Make the notes on your phone too. That's an easy way to just quickly ascertain what you're using, what you're not using. So you have that for later and you don't forget, because hopefully you're having the trip of a lifetime and enjoying yourself, and you can remember that stuff for later.
You don't know what you don't know until you try it. So go out and try it. before you do a big trip.
Don't wait until the last minute to go into camp. You know, like don't get there after dark and then be setting up and doing all of that, because you're going to be so disoriented with it being dark. You're not going to really take note, and you're also going to miss out on the experience of actually having your camp be ready to go and comfortable. So make sure you're doing your research ahead of time, looking at weather, looking at maps, and being prepared.
And of course, you can always reach out to Moto Camp Nerd with questions. Ben is really good about emailing, helping you kind of tease out what kind of setup you need for the trip you want to do, what kind of rider you are. So you can always email and get that gear advice. And check out the Motorcycle Camping Checklist. It's a free resource available on motocampnerd.com, which I will link in the description for you. Whether you're going out for your first overnight or planning to live off your bike all summer, the best place for all your motorcycle adventure needs is motocampnerd.com. Moto Camp Nerd has tents, sleep setups, camp cooking, luggage, riding gear, and more. It's your one-stop shop before you head out on your next two-wheeled adventure. Thank you, Grace, for your time and your expertise.
Thank you, Ben.
Appreciate you hanging out and answering some questions with us. And don't forget that Moto Camp Nerd has all the gear you need so that you can pack small and camp easy.